I know. All right, so let me back up here. We're talking about letter forms, and we're talking about how to work with a letter forms assignment and how to keep the integrity of a letter. And we talked about the fact that we're not going to distort a letter. We're going to keep the shape of the letter when we work with it. And Philippa didn't know what skewing is. I'm not even creating outlines. I'm taking the font. As long as the font is like this in Illustrator, and I do suggest you work in Illustrator. I also suggest you type your letters separately. So Philippa, what's your last name? L? Okay. I do suggest that you have two separate ways of typing it. I mean, two separate setups for each letter. Don't type it like this because they become grouped. If you type it like this, they're grouped and they're hard to manipulate, I believe. So start with two separate letters. I would, just for expediency, after you've done all your drawings, I just duplicate them in upper and lowercase. I duplicate them, um, I do it like that. I duplicate them in upper and lowercase. And then I make tons of them. I just get super efficient about it. As I told you, not a patient person, so I know that all of you want to be expedient about it. You'll get hung up elsewhere. I would make a ton of these letters just like this. And then what I do is I would select them and I'd pick a different font and I'd see what all these different fonts look like. And I might see what happens. I might take the Times and I might take, the Herculean, not that it's my favorite, but work with different font relationships. That's just such an ugly font to me. Well, I don't even know where to go with on it. But here, I'm a little stuck. Let's try Gil Sans, which is kind of a nice font. It's a nice sans serif font. But start working with letter relationships and mixing them, keeping track of what you're doing. And to answer the first question we talked about, what is skewing? Skewing, if you come to the scale tool, there's a tool called shear, which also skews. So you would click, which is your point of origin. So I've clicked where my point of origin is. And I can hold my shift key down so it constrains it. And that's skewing. That's distorting a letter. All right, you don't want to do that. You would do that if you were trying to make, for example, a shadow to this letter. I'm holding my Option key down and my Shift key and I'm skewing it. And maybe I want to make this gray, and I would go to Object and I'd arrange it and I'd send it to the back. And I've created the illusion of a cast shadow, right? That's what skewing is great for. Don't do it for letters, for this letter assignment. The other thing is, when you work with a letter, I suggest that after you've got all your letters set up, I would go to type and I would create outlines so it becomes a vector letter. And the advantage of that is it's easier if you want to work with, let's say, a compound path. Let's say I pick a circle behind this letter L and move it over here, and my circle's on top of my letter L, and I select them both and I go to Object and I arrange it and I make a compound path out of it. You can see the serifs of the L hang outside of the circle. I didn't distort my letter L, but what I did was I was able to color my positive negative space where the L exceeds the boundary of my circle. I can use my white arrow, my selection tool, and I can select just the circle. Oh, it didn't work. It's selecting the whole thing. I can select maybe just the circle. I'm in the direct selection tool and I held my Option key down, and I can just move the circle only, and with my arrow, just pressing my keyboard, I can manipulate it. Notice how, because it's a compound path and the letter L is, I didn't break it apart, it still keeps its darks and lights, which is kind of fun. I mean, this is where your fun comes in, seeing the different relationships. And that's the advantage of a compound path. If I broke it up into pieces, like right now, if I selected these relationships and I went to Window Pathfinder, and I broke it into parts here, which you might want to do just to have the little pieces to color. Because right now, if I want to color this, it will become one color. I can change it to any color swatch. Here, let's try Olivia's pattern, right? Please don't use patterns, okay? But you can see it fills with a pattern. But if I wanted to break this apart and I wanted maybe the bottom of the L to be a different color than the circle behind it, I would have to divide it. And I'm not sure if it works because I made a compound path. No, it will work. So I can do that. So after you've worked this through in black and white thoroughly, and you've picked your, let's say, your 2 final favorites, then you can play with colors. Then you can knock yourself out and have a good time with color. Maddie, was that a question? No. Did I see a hand go up over here? I thought I did. Yeah, Lori.
All right, so when you take a letter and you convert it to an outline and then you make it bigger, is that distorting it?
No, by enlarging this font to a larger size font. So let's say this is 12, and I partner it with this. Is that distorting it? Absolutely not.
No. Then you make it into an outline and then you take your selection tool.
Okay, so I've created an outline.
Create an outline and where is it?
I make it bigger
Yeah, with
the scale tool, maybe?
with a scale tool.
well, no,
It's
yeah,
still-
just like that.
It's
Do you
still
have to-
integrity.
Do you have to hit the shift to keep it in?
Yes.
Oh, if you don't keep
If
the
you
shift?
don't hold your shift key down, you're not constraining proportions.
Correct.
So in order to scale anything, hold the shift key down so you keep your proportions constrained. Otherwise, if I reduce this back to the scale tool, click my point of origin, nothing is holding the shift key, and I'm scaling it, I can distort it, and
So-
that is not keeping the integrity of the letter. If you want a distorted, if you want a condensed font, select a condensed font. If I want my F to be condensed, this one, I would go up here to, let's type, maybe Garamond has a condensed font. Let's see if there's condensed. No.
Yeah, some of them do.
Well,
Because when you keep it in proportion and you make
There you
it
go.
bigger, it gets
right.
bigger than you want to deal with. Really.
Right. Well, that's your call. I can also take this font. Let me undo that font. I can also type this and make it 700 points without having converted it to an outline. This is a 700 point font. That's okay. You might decide that you have a little sense of humor and you decide that, where's my letter? Sometimes when you make them so big, you can't grab something else. But, you might decide that that's it. You might decide that this little L sitting on the edge of the F is the relationship you like. You might also decide that you want this L just to sit there. I'm going to go to Object, Arrange, and bring it to the front. And you might decide that you like it as white, and that's what you like. Or you might want to take the L, base align it down here with this F, this huge F. Let me select everything except for these two. Delete them. Let me take the L and scale it. And again, because it's still a font, I can increase its size, just by typing the font size. Or I can also go to scale, hold my shift key down, and I can blow it up until it sits right at the edge of that F and right at the top here. And what you see is I've kind of abbreviated my F that's behind it because of how I've cropped it and positioned this one. And maybe I find enough letter shapes where I obliterate the whole left side of my F by how they overlap with one another. You can rotate them. I can make the L, the crossbar if I wanted. Sometimes when you start playing with things, you get happy accidents that you don't expect, which is kind of fun, I think. The more you play with it, manipulate it, you get these unexpected results from what you overlap in the letter relationships. You might decide that, let me hit undo for a second. You might decide that you want exactly identical letters and you want this one to be italic. And They're both black. Do not stroke them. Don't make an outline stroke to them. Don't use gradients. Don't use patterns. Really try to stick with the integrity of the letters, and you'll be surprised what you come up with.
But if we create a shape and the letters in the shape, can the shape have a stroke?
No, don't use a stroke. The question was if you have a shape, can you stroke your shape? I suggest work with flat areas of color, solid areas of color. Yeah, Adam.
Like you make it like a two-tone color, like a two-tone color.
You mean like a gradient?
Yeah, like a two-tone color. How do you make that?
How do you make a two-tone color?
Yeah, like say half of the F is blue, the other half is red.
Don't.
Oh, don't do that.
Don't do a gradient.
Oh.
But how do you do it? Just to answer your question, right here is the gradient tool. And if I draw, whoops, let me draw a shape. Here's, let me draw a rectangle. So that's a gradient. The gradient is selected. And with your gradient swatches, you can change them. So if I go to Window and I go to Gradient, here's my gradient swatch panel. Let me tear it off. How you add swatches to a gradient is I can add the color blue and I can pull away the black, and I can add the color pink and I can pull away the black, or I can make this a little rainbow universe and just keep adding as many as I want. That's how you make gradients. And if I wanted my letter to fill with a gradient, I'd highlight my letter, and actually let me come back and I'll make this gradient. I can add this gradient swatch to my swatch panel by yanking it off the gradient panel and adding it to my swatches next to Olivia's patterns. And I can make active the L, and I can apply the gradient to it by filling it. And am I viewing this differently? Oh, maybe I need to make it a outline. It won't fill as text.
Gradient, but like just two, just like not like red and purple and blue, not like that. Just like.
Okay, so if I understand you, if I understand what you're asking me, then if I, for example, decided that I was going to put, let's say, a rectangle here, and I decided that I wanted to break this up by using my Pathfinder and everything's different parts, and I wanted to make this red and this blue and that yellow. Is that what I hear you telling me? After you've done this completely in black and white and you're satisfied with how it looks in black and white only, then yes, you can start to play with color, but only after you've completed all of the black and white thumbnails, all of the black and white studies, and finalized the black and white favorite that you want to work on. After you have your final black and white solution, then you can step into color with it. Okay?
And you want the final to be 8 by 10?
Yeah,
two
8.
letters and 8 by 10?
Yeah, 8.5 by 11, 8 by 10. It's all good. Any other questions about letter forms? Yeah, Lori.
I'm sorry. So if you're combining letters together, and like for the example, you can just use the one up here. You see you have the L or the 1 there, and then the F. And let's say you didn't like the way that space was intersecting at the top there. Yeah, that little white space.
This?
Yeah, would that be distorting the letter if you...
If I take this and I move it over a hair,
Yeah, I know it would work there, but sometimes those little fixes don't work.
if I was here and I said, oh, I don't like this F. This F I can't manipulate right now because it's not an outline. But if I turn it to an outline and you just want me to fill in just that little corner there,
Yeah.